Welcome to the Big Gunner podcast. Today we're a little bit of Giant talk, and we'll go into a deep dive into the final game of the NCAA tournament last night. What a game! What a finish! Florida down 12 in the second half. Another one of these epic comebacks. Comes back, gets things together. Clayton opens up a little bit, hits a three, gets a drive to the basket, and just a terrible ending that Houston didn't get a shot off at the end, and survived a couple of technicals, and Florida gets the win. First things first, though, New York Giants update. We the third pick of the draft, getting a lot of news throughout the football world and media world. Again, I've been saying all along, Travis Hunter would be my guy. I see we're looking a little more at Abdul Carter. I'm really looking forward to the next couple of weeks to see where we get, and then obviously on that last Thursday in April, when we make that selection, which I think will open up the draft. But I've been a strong proponent of trading out of the pick. And I'm seeing some people bring that up now that there's a possibility the Giants might make that move. I think you can't have enough players. I think our depth is more of a problem even than the quarterback position. It seems like when we get injuries, and we've been the most injury-ridden team over the last 10 years for starters due to game one starters due to injury. We lose a lot of players. So I'm thinking this is going to be the next basic problem that we have is going to have to, look at our depth. And I know we addressed a few things on the defensive line. Obviously, the defensive secondary, we've done it. The intriguing part to me is how we've brought back the players that we had on our offensive line. Van Roten, Stinney are all coming back, and I find that to be very interesting. So we're trying to keep a nucleus glue together of what we had. Maybe we'll add an offensive lineman, which I think would be a good idea at some point in the draft. But yeah, I mean, if we're making Evan Neal inside to right guard, that's going to be what's going to solidify this. Hopefully we get into more out of Runyon. We get a healthy Thomas, and it's going to come down to our center. John Michael Schmitz has got to play better. And if we do, we might give Russell Wilson or Jamie at the time or a rookie quarterback at the time. I think we're going to be okay. I don't know if we're playoff bound. I don't know if the schedule permitted. It's going to be tough. But, highs and lows of teams in one-score games, we've elevated that from 2022. I emphasize that we were 9-3 in one score, 8-3 in one-score games, and the next year we didn't do that, and that's what caused part of the demise. And I think you have to win these games. And more importantly, it's going to be that we're going to have to stay healthy. So those are the real things that I think that, that we have to work on and, what we have to do with the Giants in the offseason. Real quick, I go back to the streak that we're on of only 2 playoff years since the Super Bowl in 2011. And, the biggest streak like that was when I was a kid, where we hadn't made the playoffs since the merger. It took us 11 or 12 years to make the playoffs. I think the merger was in 70 and 81. We made it in Ray Perkins' third year. And I just think that, that was kind of, where we're at now. But one of the things I've emphasized on this podcast is that how much I feel that the younger generation of Giant fans want the quarterback, want to rebuild, and want to go forward. I think what we have to realize, and I've heard this on ESPN with some people, is that Brian Daboll and Joe Shane's game, jobs are on the line. And I really believe this is a real important part of what we're doing. And they're going to try to save themselves. So to me, getting Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, like it or not, is a way to bring experience in the quarterback room that they feel they have a better chance to win with these guys than what we're going to do with initially putting a rookie on the field or going that direction. So that's kind of what we think, what I'm looking at and how, what I'm thinking about as far as, where this team's going to go. So I think it's all going to come down to getting more depth, having a good draft. If we have any kind of draft like we had last year, I think this team is going to be fine. I think we can get the 7 or 8 wins, hopefully keep this regime around, see the progress, maybe get a young quarterback that we turn to later in the season and we see some promise there. That's what we do. Are we going to be the Commanders? I don't know. Are we going to be the Broncos? I don't know. But, overall, these are the things that I think that, that we're going to have to hope for and address. And I think the health of this team is going to be what says, puts us in the direction that we're going to do, where we're going to be. So, that being said, turn it to the NCAA final. I thought the Final Four was fantastic. I thought it was the best Final Four and championship game in decades that I can remember. As I picked the brackets as I did say that this would happen. One of my rare big wins, but I didn't like picking all four favorites to get to the Final Four. I think it happened one time in 2008, and other than that, it hasn't happened too often. I just saw them as better than what I saw coming up, and I think the real issue moving forward is how these mid-level majors or mid-level, power conference teams can survive like this. So, it's going to come down to how these players pick. I mean, I can go to Rick Pitino's. A friend of mine made some comments that Rick's not going to really embrace recruiting freshmen. He's trying to get players that already have an existence. I listened to Roberts talk after the press conference, 6 years at Houston. This is what happens. The transfer portal, all these different ways the NIL is affecting college basketball will lead us into, I think, a place where the college basketball is going to be for the power players. It happened in football pretty much. Now it changed a little bit, the NIL football, but I just don't see it having that effect yet on basketball because it's 11 guys, not 50 or 60. 11 or 15 guys, not 50 or 60. And I think it's going to be easier for the teams with the deep pockets to do it. Now with the new rules, it's going to be somewhat level the playing field, we hope. But I did enjoy the Crown tournament in Las Vegas. 16 teams, week-long tournament. Quarterfinal division sides Monday and Tuesday. The semifinals Wednesday, Thursday. The semifinals overall, the championship in each division were Saturday and the game Sunday. And I thought the games were great. I thought there was decent atmosphere toward the end. Nebraska crowd seemed to show up. They get down 10, 12, and 14 points early in the second half and come back and win that game Sunday. I thought that was a great comeback. I thought it was fun basketball. And I kind of like that Gus Johnson emphasizing that we have $300,000 to the winner. I think if golf did that on putts, I know the PGA Tour doesn't want to do that, saying this putts for 350,000. I think it would be interesting for a person to watch that, knowing that the guy's over a 7-foot putt, trying to make it, for $500,000. I think that's an interesting facet to the game that we don't see because the money seems to be so polarizing us today, even as fans, that I think it might be something that the announcers and the producers should probably look to bring up in the future. That's just a suggestion that I've thought about for a while, but I think it's great that Gus Johnson was emphasizing that. But I think this Crown's got possibilities. I said this last week. I said it on Defo Show Monday. Why not wait till after the first round of the tournament and bring other teams in? If you're going to do it the last week, I thought it brought a lot of extra college basketball flair to the last week of the season. I'm interested to see how Fox's ratings did. Probably not that great. I'm probably the only one watching it, but I thought it was great. And if I lived in Vegas, I'd have been there. I supported the Pac-12 tournament for years. So, I thought it was a tournament. I thought the Duke collapse was very interesting. Duke up 14 with 9 minutes to go, doesn't get a field goal in the final 10 and a half minutes. And something came up in this game that I thought was very interesting. As a low-level basketball coach, as a low-level referee at times, and as a gambler and as a avid aficionado of the game and don't want to see the game going in the direction it has, I feel like there's maybe even more pressure on the coaches than the players today. It just brought out the points of listening to John Shire after he calls timeout when Duke can't get the ball inbounds up 3 with 30 seconds to go. I kind of looked at that and I thought, he's asking his team, someone's got to get open, was I read his lips. Someone's got to get open. And I'm thinking, if I was there, I'd be trying to figure out a way to get a guy open, like myself, to try to tell the players, hey, maybe have someone come in from the backcourt to help the guys in the backcourt, And then they get the ball in bounds after the timeout, after the turnover, and Knipple, who's a 92% free throw shooter, has the ball. Instead of making a reaction to move the ball up the court, which he looked like he had side up the left sideline to get up the court, he holds the ball looking for an outlet, like he didn't want it, and passed it to the 50% shooter, Proctor, from the free throw line. Proctor goes to the line, and misses the front end of a one-on-one. And then flag gets called for a pretty ridiculous foul call that people think, whether it's fixed or not fixed, you see these videos. I don't know what people are trying to get likes or whatever. But my point of this was, it looked like to me that Roberts was hooking him with his shorts. He had his hand on his shorts, pulling him into him to almost like try to draw the foul call, like throwing him off balance. And the backside official that called that had we only see flags back, couldn't really look at the contact. He made that call. And at that particular time, I thought that was really weird to call an over the back to a guy who's got a rebound base. He's getting tipped out of his hand. Houston was going to get possession of that ball. And for him to call that over the back at that particular point was pretty ridiculous. But that's the game. The games are officiated now. I look at these officials like I don't know where they're coming from, but I watched a couple of them that I weren't fond of in the Pac-12 tournament and the Pac-12 conference officials that have moved around now and got some big games in this tournament. And I just shook my head and like, this is probably a problem. In a better day, I would have liked to take my crack at it. In my younger days, if I was an official, knowing what I know now, I might try it because I've met a lot of officials. I ran leagues in New Jersey back in the late '80s, early '90s, and I had good officials doing my games, D1 officials doing my games. Late great Art McDonald was one that did my games, and he got me a group of guys to do them, and it was fantastic. And what happened was the refs told me that they liked to stay in practice, and they thought the level of play was good enough that I had this pickup tournament I ran that was good enough to that it warranted these guys would do it. They looked at the games and watched one and said, "Oh, I'll ref this. These are real players." So I've always felt that was an important part of this, and the refs need to stay active and stay sharp. And that's why I think we have different officiating today. But I see the games officiated differently. Not as many block charge calls as I've seen in years past. The walk, the pivot foot switches, the walks are different than I've ever thought. A lot of guys walk on a play. I mean, I hear the story about Derek Queen and the game winner against Colorado State, which was the only game winner in the first two rounds. They thought he walked there. And then I heard Gene Steratore talk about possession is your foot goes down after you gain full possession of the ball. So if you're bobbling it, you can actually take steps and move bobbling it. I don't ever remember that being a part of it. Was when the ball hits you. I thought that's when the steps started. You had to get the ball down and control. But yeah, I mean, it's just they're trying to make the game easier for offenses. I completely understand that. But yeah, it should be pretty interesting. But I thought Duke's collapse was due to some coaching and some lack of experience. I thought Kelvin Sampson had a coaching edge last night. I thought, again, the last play was very shocking to me that we're in a time frame of basketball where you're down two and you don't even get the ball inside the 3-point line. Technically, I looked at it was inside the NBA 3-point line. And I'm just thinking, if you need 3 to tie, I get it. But 2 to tie, you could go ahead and take the tie and then, maybe drive and kick out for a 3 if you want it. Try to penetrate. Cryer was penetrating pretty well, I thought, throughout the night. Sharp had, a couple times. I know he lost the ball previously, so maybe that got him a little antsy. But then the great closeout on Clayton, who let Sharp get the ball, almost like he set him up for that. Sharp jumps in the air, and I almost thought at the time watching it, grab the ball because no one was around and take the chances with maybe 4 seconds left on the clock to say they'll miss 1-on-1 and we'll get a chance at a 3, to tie the game late because you thought with no one there and he couldn't touch the ball, he was either giving it up to them in live action and time was running off the clock, or you would, none of your players were there to get the ball. So I thought it was an interesting and tough, in real time decision for Sharp to make. I felt bad for the kid. I felt bad for the way the game ended. I mean, I had Florida. Yeah, we bet the Florida second half under on Big Gunner on Instagram. We gave that out. But it just you wanted to see a ball get up, a shot get up. That's what I thought. I felt bad for the Houston kids who I thought had to handle themselves with such grace and high character at the press conferences, talk about what it meant to them to get there this far and wanted to win for Kelvin Sampson. I just, I could tell a story about Kelvin Sampson, and I won't today, but we'll do it somewhere down the line if it comes up again. But I'd met him once, and it was a very interesting conversation we had about what I knew about basketball, which I left feeling, this big, as I knew nothing. But it turned out my point was actually correct. But it was just, the fact that he said that J.J. Redick wasn't really going to be able to have an NBA career, and I thought that he should have drafted him, when they got Shaq in the first round, and he laughed at me. And I said, well, he goes, I'll remember you if JJ Redick ever plays in the league. Well, 15 years later and $100 million later, and now coaching the Lakers, I guess JJ Redick was a little bit more what I thought than he thought. So that was just a little exchange I had with him back in 2005, 2006 time. But anyway, yeah, I just felt like, we picked the Final Four right. We got the game. We took second in our pool. Last night, I had a weird bet: Houston to win the first half and Florida to win the game, which paid 8-1. Small potatoes, nothing major. It was just fun type of props that you find in your betting. And now, as we look and turn toward the NBA playoffs now, which is the next big thing in the hockey playoffs, it should be pretty interesting. One of the games I'm looking at tonight is Toronto Maple Leafs going down to Florida to play the Panthers. Panthers decimated by injuries. Last game again on Sunday against the Wings. Reinhart, Barkov, Bobrovsky sat. Bennett didn't play. Tkachuk's still out. I mean, a lot of their mainline players weren't playing. I think we checked it out. But tonight, with Toronto winning that division and setting a precedent after last year, the one to take them out, I think that Toronto gets it done tonight in Florida. I think we checked the injury report to make sure all these guys still aren't playing, but I think they're going to wait and get healthy because they're already solidified a playoff spot and probably lined up to play Tampa in the first round. So I think Florida's going to be okay in that, Andrew. I think they just probably play these last 2 or 3 games, just keep guys to get healthy for the playoffs, being that they're the re-rating champions. And in the NBA, there's a very interesting game that comes to where teams 7 and 8 are in the play-in, where the Orlando Magic are -4 against the Atlanta Hawks. Hawks struggle against the Knicks Saturday. I kind of like Orlando in this game at home to put their foot down and solidify their chances of getting that home playoff game against Atlanta by winning tonight. So those are the two bets I have for tonight. Um, that we're giving out, and then we're going to analyze and throw things on Instagram. The Big Gunner 1984 on Instagram, and overall, I thought the tournament was pretty good. There weren't as many exciting finishes that you like, but I thought the Final Eight and the Final Four and getting the better teams there seemed to give a little better feel for it, interest. I hope we get to see the upsets and the mid majors make runs in this tournament. I think that's one of the sweet parts of this. The NCAA tournament was having that ability to do so. But yeah, I think we're gonna look forward to seeing what happens in the future. And what we're gonna do now, that going into next week, is we're gonna get more closer to this draft, give a deep dive analyzing a couple positions. So we're gonna see what I think we got. We're gonna take a dive into the offense next week, and then the defense will be the week after. And so we should have it. We'll keep giving our picks. We're on Thursday on No Filter TV again with Defo and Bury Your Bookie. Hopefully, have some picks for that day and for the weekend. Maybe give you a little look ahead. I have a friend of mine who's a good handicapper who looks weeks ahead to bet games. So I'm going to pick his brain and see what he can give us for maybe something for the weekend, and I look forward to it. So up until then, I will say, Big Blue, go, and we'll get the right players, and we'll keep trying to make some money for everybody. So we'll see you next week.